We'll go ahead and get. All right. Seeing no hands raised at this time, we'll go ahead on with the agenda. Close that down. Let's move to approval of the minutes dated September 7th, 2021. Chair has no questions or comments. Councilman Johnson.
Look pretty straightforward.
All right, let's approve the minutes as presented in the agenda. And we'll move on to agenda bill. Let's move on to agenda bill AB 22-117, Washington Department of Contract. Who wants to?
This one's
speak to this?
Dylan's. You want it? What do you want?
I said, do you mind running the screen share?
No, no, no.
Because I can do it, but it gets kind of funny with the pedestal angles. Okay, well, hello all. I'm Dylan Gamble. I'm an associate planner and work in the community development department. Pretty sure you all know me now. I wanted to give a quick update, or I guess I want to talk about the conceptuals around Riverwalk real fast, and then I'm going to explain what this agenda bill is specifically. So the Riverwalk project is a little bit of a thing to unpack. It is a Venn diagram of overlapping concepts, and that is only complicated by how long the project has been underway. The most simplest way to put it is the Riverwalk has a master plan. The master plan says there's going to be a trail that's 3 miles long on this side of the river. It's got future dreams of the other side of the river. When we start to unpack that into distinct projects, you could see that developing in a few CIP projects. One of them is going to be acquisitions for riverfront properties. That's its own separate thing. And then you're going to see something called Riverwalk Phase 1. That's the topic for tonight. But you'll also see interactions between Sandy Cove, how the upper bank at Sandy Cove relate. That's going to be part of Riverwalk. The revetment project that was recently done on Park Avenue has a bit of Riverwalk. The parks on Riverview, they play into Riverwalk. So in a sense, it's a one big thing is Riverwalk, and then you have all the little pieces that seem to add to it to make it a more complex project. That's the part I always have to say now, because otherwise I'll end up saying some sort of joke about it being Riverwalk Phase 39 that we're working on, or something to that effect. The project at hand here is a acceptance of grant funding, and I'll clarify that in a sec, but it's grant funding for Riverwalk Phase 1, which historically would have been between the bridge at Highway 202 to downtown. However, there's a modification of scope. I'll get to that. And now the new updated scope will have to be from Kimball Creek to downtown on the east side of Highway 202. So the river side from between the river and Highway 202. The clarification there is back in 2015, the city was awarded a direct appropriations from the state. And the way that gets trickled through to us is via what looks to be like a grant, like your standard grant from the Washington Department of Commerce, except for it has a different funding source, a different process. We never applied for a grant per se, we were directly appropriated it. So while we were working to get that direct appropriations walk through Commerce, we had some difficulties in fulfilling that agreement with Commerce due to some concerns from tribal interests, as well as Department of Archaeology. DAP is their acronym. Some difficulties in kind of matching what the scope of the project was initially with the funding and how we were going to get there. We had issues. It stalled out for many years, but with a lot of effort from many people throughout the city, we reworked on that conversation with both the state, our representatives at Commerce, several tribes, liaisons through Commerce as well, and have kind of reshifted the project to include a different scope. That scope removed that section that I kind of outlined between Kimball Creek and the river where it meets the bridge. So now the project is further south of its original scope. But with this new scope, that means we no longer are in the state of conflict we were before, which allows us to bring the contract agreement for it's 474 million. It's actually 1.52, but Commerce takes a chip off of it for helping us out, I guess, for writing the contract. There is some details in here that are different than anything you would have saw back in 2018 or even 2015. There has been some changes to the rules and requirements for cultural resources and cultural resource reporting. We go from 0505, which is the standard for cultural resources reporting and what type of work we do and who we collaborate with, things of that nature, where now it's something called 2505. And the differences there are that we have a higher expectation. Maybe this is, I'm digging into Bob Sturmick's land now, but it's a different expectation of how we are going to work through our cultural resources information and what we present to the tribe, when and how frequently. And it kind of ups our level of commitment to bringing those reports and details to bear quicker, faster, giving the tribes more ability to review and weigh in on projects. So that's a bit of the difference. So this agenda bill specifically tonight is simply the acceptance of that grant funding via the agreement through Commerce that has been worked through between Commerce and the city so that we can provide the funding. The part that I think is missing from this that you'll see is there's not pretty pictures. We're not quite ready for the changes in scope that are implemented. When we change the scope for this, we're going to have to change the design from what we originally had. So if you've seen a Riverwalk design, preliminary or otherwise, we're going to have to modify it a bit to match our new scope as this grant describes. That's going to be my next step. We will accept this funding. With the funding we have, the amount we've spent before, the current CIP, we're going to look through to how to make the current scope requirements that we have listed in this agreement match. And then I'll be providing a updated design following. So step one, step two, we're kind of stacking it up. Right now it's lock in the money. This is a big moment. And then the next piece will be seeking out a consultant to finish up the design work. And by seek out a consultant, I mean, go back to the consultant that's already done all the work for us. We have to change some things. We have a lot of work to do to catch us back up. And then I'll be presenting the next optionnaire, so to speak, what we can look to see in that location and what options exist for us now that we have some differences in new shoreline master plan, for example. So we'll do some updating. I feel like I've spoken a lot. Bob, would you like to interject with anything?
Sure. And just a couple of things. Dylan did a great job for a project that has a lot of history to it. Just a couple of clarifications. One aspect for in terms of sort of where the city sits with the project and the money that's different in this process. Dylan explained this was a direct appropriation. The way a grant process would typically work, the city would apply for a grant as a condition of getting the grant, sign the contract. There would often be requirements to engage in consultation around historic and cultural resources. In this case, the consultation was ahead of the contract. Go consult. If you consult properly, we'll give you a contract. So that resulted in some significant expenditures and work ahead of actually having the contract. So that's part of the reason that, as Dylan said, it's a big deal to now have this. The other part that's different here is that this, in addition to the executive order consultation requirements that Dylan touched on, it was Executive Order 0505 issued by Governor Gregoire, and now the newer 2102 issued by Governor Inslee. In addition to those requirements, the city collaborated with the Snoqualmie tribe and negotiated some additional language to the contract that specifies an ongoing communication / consultation process as we work through design and construction. The standard process would be one consults, the parties DAP, a tribe says, that's good, check, and then the project sponsor goes on. And this outlines something that is maybe perhaps less precise, but with ongoing steps through to just continue the relationship that the city's established with the tribe over the past couple of years. So it was, I think, there's a lot of work by both parties. People are pretty satisfied with where it is. It outlines a process to get us through final design and commencement of construction. And that language is in the document that's in the agenda packet.
Councilor Bitts, you have any questions?
No. My only suggestion would be that you do this one off consent, because I have a feeling folks are gonna want to look at how this one's being budgeted. You know.
Okay.
Not to say that there's anything wrong with it, it's just unusual, at least compared to some of the others that we've seen.
Yeah, I've got some questions on those lines. Councilman Johnson?
So just wanted to clarify that this doesn't include the Sandy Cove rehabilitation. However, I am wondering about the order of events. Does the Sandy Cove rehabilitation have to occur before this current plan is adopted, or does this kind of bypass that issue that I thought we'd had in the past with regard to Sandy Cove?
Yeah, I think I can actually answer this. One of the nice things about where we sit now is that the Sandy Cove revetment work is further along than it was when we were looking at this in the past. The revetment work does it changes how that area is going to interact with the park significantly. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. So one of the concerns would have been at the time, well, you can't really build the upper banks of the park or any Riverwalk concepts if you're then going to drive a giant truck through there and destroy things. And Jeff can speak more to this for sure. The way this interacts with this project specifically, one of the things about Riverwalk Phase 1 is that it has been avoiding becoming Sandy Cove Upper Bank as long as the project has lived. It has essentially tried to jump around it and allow Sandy Cove's revetment project and its upper bank, however you define that, to live on its own, but to create the opportunity for that project to link up at some point. So the current Riverwalk project, as it's been outlined and worked through with Commerce back in 2015, more or less jumped across Sandy Cove. However, the scope of it maybe allows us to include some very cool details on how it connects to Sandy Cove Park. I just don't know how far our money will get us. I want to see an opportunity where, with more information about how Sandy Cove revetment and the upper bank will be established, now that that's further along, I think we'll have better opportunity to link the two projects. But we're probably going to have to tease them apart due to the scope of the grant and what they will reimburse us for.
Okay, so coming up to Sandy Cove, is that what is meant by that? It will this section of the Riverwalk would go from Kimball Creek to downtown. Does that mean really from Kimball Creek to the northern part of Sandy Cove, and then we'll figure out the Sandy Cove part later, or does this also go through Sandy Cove?
We left it vague.
Ambiguous. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't drill into the details with Commerce on exactly where to give us this kind of flexibility.
Okay.
For example, in the 2015 contract, they were intending to use the bit of trail where the Park Street revetment got. Have you been on the little not gravel, the bark path that's there? So if you were to go there, there's a little bit of bark path. That bark path was included in the original 2015 scoping. However, it exists now, so there's no need for it. I'm going to seek out opportunities to make the Riverwalk Phase 1 encompass as much as possible, but I don't really know where the limitations are going to be yet. We've spent some money. We have some money. We have a grant fund. We have other projects nearby. It's getting complicated. It's hard to tease apart what opportunities exist for us. I don't know, Jeff, if you wanted to.
Yeah, I just say that we're gonna try to.
Yeah,
Go as far as it can.
yeah. Or do as best we can, maybe not as far. We want to make the best thing with this money and then, seek the next best thing. It'll be a balance though.
A couple follow-on questions. Where within the agenda bill does it tell me how much money we're receiving?
In the agenda bill, it says right there, the city anticipated 1.479 million.
No, that says you expected 1.479 million, which leads me to the question of how much are you actually getting? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I'm
Words are
sorry.
important.
Yes. yeah.
Okay, I had to go fish for it to figure out what did you get? If you were expecting that, what did you get? And so I had to go to the attachment to find that out. It shouldn't be that difficult for me. Please go to the budget section. What does that first sentence mean?
Department of Commerce. This is trying to connect which CIP project that this funding sources would be linked to.
And is that Riverfront land acquisition demolitions, Riverfront project Arboretum, Riverfront project Boardwalk? Those, at least the CIP version I have, those are the Riverfront projects I have listed.
There's also a Riverwalk project northwest of Sandy Cove Park.
What number?
That one.
Yeah,
Yes, it's
It's
so.
it's in the CIP that we got.
yeah, northwest of Sandy Cove. Okay.
Yes, the difficulty has been names have changed and it's frustrating. But Riverwalk Phase 1, Riverwalk northwest of Sandy Cove Park are the identical CIPA items historically. They just have a different title.
So.
What was the first
names-
one?
Sorry,
Names don't change
right,
until the CIP changes to reflect. When you come
Right.
and talk to me about project XYZ,
mhm,
I want to look up XYZ.
okay,
If you're going to call it ABC, then you need to start the introduction of it. In your CIP, it says this, but we've renamed it. But this is what I have to refer back to. So you got to give me the linkage between what you have here and what is in the CIP. I'm sorry, Councilman Vince, go ahead.
No. I understand what you're saying. I think, I think in your analogy, I think maybe they went from XYZ to WXY. I don't know if it was necessarily an ABC.
I agree. But again, I got a lot of them that start with Riverwalk and none of them have I got a phase 3, but I don't know what a phase 1 is. Okay. But to boil it down, this is merely the agreement between the state and us to accept the $1.479 million.
right.
I say we take it.
I got no argument with free money. Okay. You still want off consent?
No, free money, I'm okay with consent.
Are you okay? All right, so let's proceed forward with this and go ahead and put it on as consent item, please. Thank you.
Actually,
Let's move then back to what's next. Will be Agenda Bill 127 Consultant Service Agreement with OTAC for design of Kimball Creek Bridges restoration.
All right, hello, folks. If you don't know me, I'm Jeff Hamlin, city engineer, Public Works Department. So this one here, I guess I got the next 3 agenda bills, so I'll just stand here for a while. And this one here is a consultant services agreement with an engineering firm to do the design for repairs on the Kimball Creek bridges. So I think some of you folks may remember that when we had our CIP walkthrough, we had gone over there and stopped and kind of showed you, it's hard to see, but what we really have is 2 small, short span bridges, which are dilapidated. They have, well, they've been in decline for many years, and starting back in 2016, we had received a grant from PSRC to do the design to replace those bridges. Strangely, we didn't check on what our funding source would be for construction because they are short span bridges. They're not on the National Bridge Inventory list. So they're not eligible for funding. Oddly, we did actually receive or were offered funding from PSRC. It was partial funding and we declined it. And I never really got a clear answer on why we declined that. I think because it just wasn't enough money to fully replace them. So either way, we had a inspection by the county in 2021, and they have declined to the point now where they're in danger of imminent failure in the next few years. We were already, without getting too technical, the areas behind the abutments is losing material. The abutments are made of wood and they're crumbling, and they're going to fall apart here pretty darn soon if we don't do something. And that will be very impactful to the city because it will close Meadowbrook Way for months probably while we do an emergency fix, which will spend tens of thousands of dollars and get us right back to where we are right now. So what this is, what we're proposing to do is to repair those bridges. We did a study with OTAC. We used OTAC to the company that we are trying to contract with this in this agenda bill to give us options, to evaluate what our options were. One, replace the bridges. Two, replace them, in kind with other bridges, new bridges, replace them with box culverts, hoping we could maybe get a hold of some funding for fish passage culverts. Turns out we couldn't, or otherwise repair them. So being that the repair cost is 20% of replacement cost, it makes it a good value for the city to repair these bridges. And we should get at least minimum of 20 years life out of those repairs. So this is a agenda bill to contract with OTAC to do the design for repair of those two bridge structures. Yes.
How short is a short span bridge compared to a long span bridge?
Anything over 25 feet.
And how long are these?
So these are 22 feet.
Can we just make a longer bridge? I mean, it seems like we could get some earth movers and get some funding.
I tried every way. Now, there is a possibility, once we get through design, we may get some, I can appeal to PSRC. I am on the RPEC committee, and since I'm engaged with those folks, they did offer us some funding before. Usually at the end of every funding cycle, they end up with a little bit of extra money. So they have some discretionary spending. So they may, which is what happened last time. And I think it was 2019. We may be able to finagle some money out of PSRC to help fund construction.
I mean, it seems
We're
like
looking at
3
about
feet of,
$700,000 to
about 3
repair.
how much?
700,000 to repair, as
Okay.
opposed to 3.5 to replace.
Seems like 3 feet of bank could easily wash away.
Well, it's actually the girders, the length of the girder section. So we can't really go in and weld on 3 more feet of girder. So.
Well, it doesn't sound like you're trying.
I put a lot of effort into trying to figure out how to fund these things, and we were just coming up short. We talked with all the agencies, and they just.
But there's the potential that there's some kind of wiggle room maybe, or discretionary funds.
Yeah, PSRC is the only one I can find, unless there is later on with this what do they call it? The infrastructure funding, the bill, that there may be some discretionary funding for projects like this laying out there that we just aren't privy to, or because it's discretionary, we don't meet the requirements, but because we're just short of it, we may qualify.
Councilman Johnson, do you have any questions?
Just trying to work through the numbers here. Is this burn rate of $16,000 per month? Does that end up adding up to the 63 and some change?
I think that was.
Is that what that is?
Would have to answer this, but that is an estimate based on,
Okay. So those are the same thing. It's just two different ways of saying it.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but here's the reality for the
Okay.
biennium, for 21-22 biennium. We are at the end of it, right? So by the time this gets through council, will be the end of October. We have contracting, we won't get a bill until December. Right, and so we won't have any outlays on this thing until the end of December, which would be our first bill, which would be something far less than
That's not what you're
60,000.
requesting in the budget section.
So that's basically 4 months, basically. If you take the total contract divided by the time frame they're looking at for the most part, you get kind of a monthly estimate, right? And so that's where the 63. It's basically the 15,000 you see there multiplied by 4.
Okay, so then for the biennium that we're currently in, the total amount would be by the end of this year, the 64 and some change plus 18 and some change, right?
I
Would be
think
the total
that's-
amount that would have been
That's
spent.
what's
in this biennium.
available. I don't think we'll spend that much.
Okay. And then the new contract value is going to be the 200,000 plus. And the idea is to reduce or to take some of the appropriation for 23-24. Or no, I'm sorry, how much was in the CIP from 23-24 and put that into 21-22? Is that how that works?
I'm not there yet.
Well, so yeah, the answer is yes. We want to remain within our total project budget. But they're not starting in January. They don't want to start in January. They want to get this going right away. And so in order to make sure that we've got sufficient appropriation right in this 2-year period, we want to increase that and then take it away from what we have for 2023, 2024. So the problem is we've got a transportation capital fund where we spend dollars on sidewalk replacements, street resurfacing and stuff like that. And we don't want to exceed that appropriation. If you start adding additional items to that list overall that we were anticipating finishing for this 2-year period, way back when we adopted the amended CIP, then we have to make sure that we have sufficient expenditure authority from council in order to accomplish that. Otherwise, we may exceed our budget in total. So we need to make sure that we remain within our 2021, 2022 budget for this transportation capital fund that we have, but also make sure that we protect our total project budget for this entire project, which should not exceed 1.31 million that we have set here. So does that kind of make sense for the most part?
I think I followed that.
We're dealing with these timelines or these timeframes.
I'm still confused here. Okay, because this specifically says we're gonna take money out of 2023, 2024 biennial budget. And we're gonna add money into the 2021, 2022 budget to cover this.
Yes.
Okay, but in that case, you're not remaining within your budget for 2021, 2022 on street projects. In essence, you're gonna have to pull from end fund balance to pay this, and that deficit will carry to next.
That will carry, right? So
Yeah,
the ending
that
fund
will
balance that
deficit
we're
will carry, and and it'll be absorbed.
But
in
then we're
2023,
telling
2024.
staff, we've got to remain within our remaining project budget for 2023, 2024.
So the way,
So the goal is to end up with the same ending fund balance, right, by the end of this biennium that we had anticipated when we brought the CIP forward to you.
the way I understood it, what he was saying is they're gonna take this portion of the 23, 24 and move it, or this portion of I forget the years, the future years, and move it
23,
forward
24.
because they're able to accelerate this project. So once they move it though, then they're within budget for next year. And then they'll also be on track to be on budget the following year. It's just accelerating the funding, right? They're not asking to keep that extra money for the following year as well. They're just moving it up so that they can spend it
Well,
on the.
okay, it may be
Right.
mechanics, okay? What are we talking about? $60,000?
Basically, yeah.
Not $60,000. So you're gonna increase the budget for this project for this year, for this biennial by $60,000.
Mhm.
In essence, you can't really. I'm reluctant to say that we're shifting money between this biennial and next biennial. That's kind of different. In essence, what you're doing though is you're taking ending fund balance to cover that. That deficit in the ending fund balance will carry over to the next biennial as a beginning fund balance minus the $60,000. Now, his other statement is that doesn't change the overall project cost of this, will remain in the project cost.
So
as the
that's why
project
we would
schedule.
subtract it from 2023 and 2024. So
You and I are going different ways. We're doing the same thing.
Okay. Uh-huh.
I can't, I have a hard time when you say take money from future budget, this is.
Yeah.
When my wife tells me how much money she saved shopping. It's okay. It's just,
But it sounds like I mean, this sounds like a really efficient way of doing things. If they figured out a way to accelerate this project, and what they have to do is say, hey, when we originally planned it, we thought it was going to take longer, but we'd like to bring some of that money closer to now from off in the future when we thought it was going to be done. That seems like an efficient way to get this stuff done. I like to use Kimball Creek sometime, that Meadowbrook Way. And, I don't want an abrupt stop at any point.
Break check.
It sounds like they figured out a way to get that project going by just asking us to say, hey, we allocated these funds for off in the future. Can we bring them forward so that we can get the work done more efficiently? That's what it sounds like. That's what's happening?
In essence, they're accelerating the project, yes.
We are needing to accelerate many of these projects to now to be able to bid them in January, to build them in spring. If we wait till January before we start design packages, there will be a year delay on every project in the CIP.
One of the complaints that I've heard from councilmen who've been doing this a lot longer than me is that we don't end up spending the money that is budgeted. The projects don't get done at the rate that they are often, the plan is sometimes more ambitious than Parks and Public Works is able to execute. But it seems like we're getting a lot of projects coming to us saying, hey, we need to accelerate this. We figured out a way to do this more efficiently, more quickly, and we want to get this going. I think when it makes sense, what they're saying, where the money's going to come from, I think we should accommodate that, right? Don't you think?
I'm not arguing against the project or against its acceleration.
You're just worried about, what do you, I guess I
I'm
don't
worried about
understand.
spending dollars today for future dollars. And the further future you get, the more ambiguous those dollars are. Okay. Again, this is $60,000, so it's not.
Well, let's say
This
it was,
will not
let's say it was $1
bank-
million.
bank-
Let's say it was something big. Let's say it was a big chunk of money. And there was a project like this that they could accelerate that we needed to get done. And it was a matter of adjusting the two budgets to put the money where they need it so that they could spend it. Would that be a problem?
Yes, that would roll into a different conversation of what are the funding sources and are they now or future? Right? Are we spending today's dollars or tomorrow dollars that we don't have yet? Okay, $60,000, I'm not, we have that ending fund balance we cover.
Right, and
Yeah.
we're doing this conservatively. So as Jeff suggested, I've provided 4 months of $15,000 and we're already in September right now at this stage, which means likely the first payment will not be made until October. So it's just enough to cover us, right, for the most part. It may not even be 60,000, it could be 30,000 by the end that we'll spend this year and so on. So,
Right, you're being conservative saying.
right, but I would just
If they go gangbusters,
You know,
here it is.
make sure to know, we need to accelerate these projects. The Parks and Public Works Director has identified that we need to get these bids out. We'll hopefully get better prices or better than what we would do if we were to advertise this in May, for example. And so this is essential to making sure that we can help stay within our overall budget as much as possible, as well as, hit the timeframes that council is seeking, because we need to deliver these projects. And that's, it's money that we're holding on to doesn't do the public any good necessarily. It's the work that we're doing that provides the service overall. So.
Sorry, I'm not the chair. You're the chair. You.
Well, you can- no, just slap me if you want.
I think that what I would contrast what's being proposed here with would be if they were essentially saying, we need more money to get the project done, period. And we were borrowing from the future to cover increased costs. That would be a very different conversation. But since we're not doing that, we're just shifting money in time and it's not a huge dollar amount. I think that I'm fine with this and I'm glad to see we can get things going a little bit farther or faster. Let's see if we can do that kind of across the board as much as we can as it's feasible. And I don't even think that this necessarily needs to come off consent. So I think that I'd be comfortable with this one being on consent.
Yeah, the other point I'd like to make is one of the things I hate about government spending is it's very often that when you're spending other people's money, that you're not trying to be frugal with it, but over and over again, I hear Parks and Public Works coming with these ideas because they save money to do them this way. So like when we accelerated that sidewalk sewery thing, that I don't remember the name of, you know what I'm talking about.
The
Back,
sidewalk sewer thing.
you know what I'm talking about.
384.
If we can do those, if we can accelerate these things and they're thinking about how we can combine projects and speed them up and save us money down the road, I love that. Let's keep, I'm always going to be a vote in favor of it. I think these guys are too. So
Okay,
I'm fine with off consent as long as Joe has to take the heat from,
you're off.
No, I
consent.
said
You're-
on
he-
consent.
He said
on
on.
consent,
Yeah.
on consent. I'm fine with on consent as long as Joe takes the heat from Jim.
No. No,
We'd be in more trouble if we took it off, but anyway.
no,
All right.
when you get to chair takes the heat, okay? All right, I'll go with consent. It'll come off, but I'll go with consent. All right.
All right.
Let's go to the next one. Which will be
Meadowbrook.
agenda
Bridge.
bill 22-129 Meadowbrook Bridge load rating update.
Okay, here's this is another consultant services agreement with Tetra Tech this time to do a load rating update. So, as the agenda bill says, the background on this one's fairly short. We have not, well, in 2006, we had redone the bridge and it was a pretty full-scale rehabilitation of the bridge. And it's in generally good shape, other than the fact that we haven't done anything to it since, and it's in need of some TLC. And because we haven't done a load rating since 2006, and because King County recently did an inspection on the bridge and found some deterioration in the metal, especially in these things called gusset plates, which are, scabbed metal on top of the bridge connections. They are requiring us to redo a load rating on it to make sure that it still has sufficient load capacity. So we need to have that done by the end of the year. And it's not a difficult exercise, but it needs to be done. So in order to make that happen, we have a contract with Tetra Tech here on the docket for about $153,000, $154,000 to update the load rating. Now, we're going to have to do some additional follow-on after this is done, after the load rating is done. This will inform some decisions about what we need to do for ongoing maintenance of the bridge. So clearly, we're going to need to paint it fairly soon, and we're going to need to do some minor repairs, meaning scab on some more metal in places to replace the metal that's lost from corrosion. And so there will be another agenda bill following the load rating next year to do those repairs. And I can't give you a cost on that yet because we don't know what extent that's going to be, but it won't be huge. Painting that bridge is not going to be cheap, but I don't remember. We had estimated what it cost to paint that bridge back in 2010 and can't remember what it was. Do you remember what it was?
Thought you said it was 400. and
Yeah, that's like $400,000.
We
Yeah.
budgeted 1.7 in the CIP for it.
Yeah, to do some additional, to do the work, right? We're probably going to be $1.5 million to do the work and to paint it. Yeah. Bridges are expensive.
What's the largest vehicle that's allowed to go over that bridge?
God, I couldn't tell you that. There's, it's been load rated for, so part of what this load rating does, it adds new criteria to the load rating. So it needs to, one, look at these gusset plates. It needs to load rate for the gusset plates. And it also needs to look at new vehicles. So there's these new vehicles which are standard weight and size, which have a loading profile that you would apply to the bridge structure. And since the 2006 load rating didn't include those vehicles, these are a new criteria or new requirements from WashDOT. The load rating has to include those. I'm certain that it can handle, a full-size semi truck, but I couldn't tell you what load is. And it's not really the maximum weight. It's not a point load, right? It's a load, it's a weight distributed over an area. And it's a dynamic load as well. So it's not just a weight sitting on the bridge, it's a moving. So that has to be analyzed. So I can't really give you that information. I don't know.
So if the state is requiring us to do this, is it incumbent upon us to maybe limit larger vehicles over there until we've done this rating?
I don't think so. I think that the load ratings are typically fairly conservative. And I don't know that it's necessary that the bridge is deteriorated to the point where it's structurally deficient. In fact, the inspection report from the King County gives us what's called a structural deficiency rating, sufficiency rating of the bridge. And it's not at the point where it is structurally deficient. It still has fairly good score. Which I don't remember what that is, but it's still in the good category. So it's not structurally deficient. It's not in danger of imminent collapse.
In the work that we did in 2006, would we have expected that work to have sustained the bridge for more than 16 years?
Not necessarily. So, that's a difficult one to answer. I imagine, the bridge is meant to last for upwards 50 to 100 years, depending on how well you maintain it. Well, that comes with several caveats. One is how you do the maintenance on it and the changes in the regulations which come upon us. So I don't really know that we could go back to 2006 design and say that, that was poorly done or if it was insufficient. I think that it was done in conformance with standards of practice in that time.
Coatings such as these should be probably maintained every 10 years on critical equipment like that.
They're rarely done every 10 years, but that's, the inspections kind of tell you when you need to do it. And then our last one before this was 2019, and they were recommending that we should be painting it. And, we had talked about it then, but it was never brought forward.
This seems like a, a fairly similar thing to before, if I'm not mistaken. The amount, the 1.7 is what's in the CIP, just double checked. But we don't actually have a budget for 2023, 2024. We have a proposed one. And that would cover the entire amount for the Meadowbrook Bridge Restoration Project. At least that's what's in the CIP. So yeah, we're essentially just accelerating. So I kind of feel the same way with this one that I did with the previous one.
Yeah. In my world, a lot of what I do is try to mitigate risk. All right. So sometimes if we're trying to save money by extending a project, we put ourselves through another storm season, which could have, some catastrophic result. So I would say that's not necessarily the case with the Meadowbrook Bridge. Here we have to get the load rating done because we have a deadline to do it. But it's time to do some maintenance on that bridge. In the long run, that saves us money. All right, that's the smart way to do it. With the Kimball Creek bridges, we have an imminent failure. So if we can't get to construction this summer, then we have to keep our fingers crossed through another year of flood season and hope we don't lose one of those bridges. Right. So this one's not as critical, except that we do have a deadline to address. Yes.
One clarifying question about the timing of things. In order to have an amendment to this budget, do we have to have a 2023, 2024 budget in place? Meaning, do we have to actually approve that and then have the amendment
I guess your question.
so that we can borrow from the future, or can we not even?
Well,
borrow
if-
from the
so
future?
if
Or
council
we
approves
keep
these
from
two
the
agenda
future?
bills, for example, we will reduce the proposed budget that we bring back to you by this amount that we're suggesting here. We would come back and we would ask for, so there's the proposed 2023, 2024 budget, but then also we have to amend the 2021, 2022 budget by the end of the year to make sure that we have sufficient expenditure authority from council in order to cover what we need to. So you're going to have two separate agenda bills, one for 2023, 2024, and then amended one for 2021, 2022 that we would both request council to adopt, basically.
Oh, that makes sense.
Okay, we've not approved the 2023-24 budget.
No, we have not.
Okay.
But council has adopted a CIP, right, for example, and I think the administration has made the point that we will incorporate the numbers that we have in there into our proposed budget. But however, circumstances have changed since we adopted that, as I think you, Councilmember Holloway, has suggested in the past. The CIP is only good on the day that it's adopted, right, for the most part, right? But you understand things change, and so this is just a couple of those changes. We want to accelerate these projects so that we can get them going.
No plan survives contact with reality.
Yes, that.
Ground rule.
Mhm.
So, but Drew, help me with the budget, because now we're up to $200,000.
Yeah, I'm glad we softened you up with the easier.
Yeah, you did the 60, now you do it. What's the revenue source for this?
So this project itself, let me go ahead and open up my CAP documents. Just love it when the screensaver comes on at the wrong time.
Better than a restart.
Yeah, that's true. Sorry for the delay. Gotta find the right page. Registration. So in essence, we've got utility and transportation taxes. So as part of that category, you've got the utility tax, which is devoted to transportation or street resurfacing purposes. You've got real estate excise tax, as well as some grant funds that we've proposed as well as a part of this overall total for the funding sources, the three funding sources for the Meadowbrook Bridge Restoration Project.
And those three sources right now, what is the unexpended value for 2021, 2022?
The unexpended, so do you want to know how much?
I
real
know
estate
that was a homework question versus but
Uh-huh.
well, again, I'm,
So in terms of our cash flow, right? If we were to take a look at the CIP document, we're expecting an ending fund balance of $2.1 million by the end of 2024. If so, in essence, we're starting 2023 and what we've predicted. And now I'm going to go up to the cash flow forecast that we've provided
what was the ending fund balance at 2022?
for 2022. All right, let me go to that table. I have to turn my head sideways. So $20.1 million we're anticipated to start 2023 with
Okay, so that must be the ending fund balance at
for 2022.
2022.
Yes. yeah,
Okay.
correct, yeah. Uh-huh.
The issue I have, if I'm buying dinner tonight on next week's paycheck, only way that I can do that is I either reach into my savings account, which in this case is ending fund balance, and take money out of there, or I use my credit card and I incur debt. I can't spend those dollars next year,
No, I get that.
next paycheck.
It
How
seems,
do I?
it
So-
seems to me like what they're talking about is saying, we want to buy next week's dinner with the dollars now because we can get your $100 dinner for 90 bucks.
There's a blue plate special going
Yeah,
on, and I
yeah.
want to buy it now because it's going to be
Yeah.
cheaper than later. Totally understood that. And he did answer my, I mean, there's an ending fund balance, savings account that we can dip into, but it's going to affect the beginning fund balance of next year.
So let's just extend it a little bit further. Maybe you've got $50,000 in savings, right? For example, you know, you're going to generate an income next year, right? It's highly likely. So you might borrow a little bit today, right? At the prices that you have today with the full knowledge that you're going to have that income come in during the next year. And you kind of have a sense of what that income is going to look like, right? So then you can replenish the savings that you had previously with some of those dollars. Right, so you can spend today, but then also replenish what you need to in the future in order to bring that fund balance back up to the $50,000 savings.
I know what you threw borrow. So you can take out a
Well,
savings
Mhm.
to pay for it and then try to bring savings back up.
Replenish it,
and
right?
replenish
back-
it further on.
So we've
The only
estimated,
way, the
yeah,
only way I can borrow is bond, other forms of debt, or this public work. I wish it would come back, that public works thing from the state, which was really nice,
so, yeah.
which I think went away.
Well, so what we're doing is we're assessing the likelihood of the revenue that we're going to generate over the next year. And so during the CIP process, we discussed the probability that we're going to collect the real estate excise tax at the level that we've set, right, as part of the overall CIP. And I think what we told you is, in essence, we are taking the average and we subtracted a standard deviation right below that, which means that likely we will hit that baseline kind of moving forward for 2023 and 2024. And so the forecast that we provided you was hopefully conservative enough to make sure that we hit those targets as we kind of proceed. And so even though it's not money in the bank necessarily, there's a high probability that we're going to hit those targets that we've kind of set.
I agree with that statement for 2023, 2024.
Mhm. Right, yeah. And then as the farther you go out, the forecast becomes a lot more foggy, right? Yeah.
Any other questions?
No, good discussion.
Want this one on consent or non-consent?
I don't know. You had a lot of problems with this one, so I feel like we ought to put this on non-consent. You know, I have a feeling there are other people who are gonna want to
At
look at it.
the dollar figure we're talking about and at the shifting between the biennials, yeah, I would like this one. The other one, okay. It'll get
Is
pulled,
small,
but
smaller
okay. Piece, but it's under the same kind of conditions we're dealing with here. But the short answer when Dr. Mayhew comes up is in essence, we're pulling from the ending fund balance. It's there to cover these. Believing that getting these projects, this one's got to go. We're on hook for the state. The other one, we believe there's savings to be had by pulling it forward. So. it'll
Well, and
all
that
balance out.
one's also urgent as well. That's an urgent project too.
Bridge is collapsing.
Yeah.
Public safety.
It's a bridge, it's bridges that are getting tired. That's not
I know,
good.
but we've had those, well, never mind. I'm not gonna.
Okay, so we're not worried about those bridges?
The state
are
hasn't
worried
told us
about-
we have
We
to.
we have been worried about those bridges for some time.
Yeah. The state hasn't told us we have to, but he has. That's, he's right here.
I mean, we've had those, that's project bridges for
Goes way back.
way back. And so you could make an argument, but I'm not making the argument of you could go a little further, but we gotta do some of those bridges.
I
Okay.
prefer to get our savings the way they're suggesting it by,
That's why I made
yeah.
that argument
yes, yeah.
of it's a savings opportunity against ending fund balance.
Then I think also just clarifying, making sure everyone fully understands that these projects are not running over budget and that's why we're increasing the amount now. It's that they're just accelerating
Yeah.
them. So we're moving money out.
Right, the individual project will remain within their budget.
For now.
We'll have to increase the budget for this biennial.
We're
by the-
decreasing it for the next biennium.
But it will, and that will affect the next biennial because your beginning fund balance will be reduced appropriately. Yes. Okay.
So I do have one last question now that you've made that point. The savings that we're anticipating, are we going to see that in the changing budget for Drew? Do you know what my question is? Does that make?
Well, so isn't this in regard to Kimball Creek? I think
Uh-huh.
Jeff suggested
Yeah.
that there's going to be some reduced expenses from doing the repair as opposed to a full restoration.
I think what we're doing really is mitigate risk. So if we can get to construction this summer, then we don't have to
Irrigation lines, right.
risk another winter flood season of high water and potential washing out the abutment.
Totally. Yeah, I absolutely appreciate that point. I think it's a great point, but one of the other points that you made was that by bidding it now rather than waiting till May, we can anticipate some savings on the project. It'd be really nice when we talk to Councilman Mayhew to be able to point to that savings as well.
Yeah, in the public works world, it's a good idea to try to bid it in bidding season. So in the winter, when contractors aren't as busy and they're trying to fill up their schedules for the summer. Right, so they're a little bit more hungry, we get a little bit more bids, we get better pricing to some degree. Right, because the contractors are hungrier.
Well, to what degree? Would that degree be able to show up somewhere in the budget?
Well, it's difficult to say right now because of the construction escalation that's happening, right? So supply chain issues, the price of oil, the price of materials has gone up because of these shortages. So during the summer, you would anticipate that that would be worse because a lot of those materials which are in the supply line are being used up or consumed, and there's not a lot of extra surplus laying around. So you would expect to pay a premium for materials when you bid them later, where you're probably going to get your best pricing, but then
But it's not
Yeah.
necessarily something you can put a dollar figure on.
prices on some things are going down and some things are going up. So, you know, it kind of depends on the supply chain and price of oil, are the two big factors right now.
But mainly you don't want these bridges to collapse.
That's my thing. If we have a collapse, that's gonna cost us tens of thousands of dollars to get us back to where we're at right now, right? So the sooner we get that constructed, we remove that risk of losing more money.
So we're avoiding costs,
Right
right?
on.
So in essence, if we have to eventually, if that does happen, God forbid, right?
Yeah.
For example, we have to, then it's going to crowd out other projects within the CIP and then we can't get as much, right, necessarily completed because that might take priority depending on what council decides at that stage. So then what projects are you not going to do in order to cover the additional cost that comes with that? So
What? Oh, Councilman Johnson?
This might be also a case where being on budget might end up being the savings, since these may have been budgeted before a lot of the inflation hit after the pandemic. So this could be one of those things where it's a savings because we might even hit our budget or appropriate amount. And then also, it also might just be wise to keep the appropriation amount as it is, just in case we need it all, rather than forecasting us being under budget and then having to come back and then appropriate more again in the future.
Wouldn't change it till you got a contract.
Right. All right.
That's his next point of when he can really have some solid dollar figures when he's got a contract.
Yeah.
All right, we're good on that one, non-consent. Let's
Yep.
go ahead to agenda bill 22-134, consultant service agreement with KPG Pusomas
SOMAS.
SOMAS,
yes,
all right, it's a silent P.
Yeah.
For design of Sequoia Parkway rehabilitation project.
Correct. Another consultant service agreement. This is for, of course, the Parkway. I believe you're all familiar with where we're at with the Parkway, but I'll do a really quick recap. The pavement out there is deteriorating. It's 20 years old. One of the things that we'll want to do with any road when it starts to deteriorate is to do a rehabilitation on it. If we let it go too far, then we have subgrade damage and then the price to fix it goes way up. So the Parkway is due. We've been working for some time to try to get funding to do it. The bill is going to be somewhere around $6 million is what we anticipate based on the price of asphalt right now. And so we've been moving forward. We did get an appropriation from the state under the Move Ahead, the MAW program, the Move Ahead Washington program. So $5 million to repave the Parkway. That will go a long way towards hitting that goal. We are also trying to get the state of Washington State DOT to take ownership of the Parkway. And they would be responsible for the long-term maintenance of the Parkway after that. There's goods and bads. There's arguments to be made both ways, whether or not that's a good idea. But I think we are at the point where we have made that decision that we want WashDOT to take that. And so that being the case, in order to get WashDOT to take it, it has to be compliant with their standards, meaning for us, the biggest cost impact there is our ADA ramps. The ADA ramps on the Parkway are not in compliance with the ADA standards. Not all of them. Some of them, from what I understand, about 80% of them are not. So we need to go in and repair those ramps. It's not a huge expense item, but the design work is pretty hot. That's why we have a $326,000 expenditure here for this contract. There is a fair bit of design work that goes with this to upgrade all those ADA ramps. We have traffic signalization. We have to do traffic control plans. We have to do temporary sediment and erosion control. There's a lot of things that we have to do to be in compliance with what's called the lag manual, the local agency guidelines, which is what WashDOT uses as their guideline for projects. And because we're getting state funding, we have to follow the state's procedures. So in order to meet all of those requirements, we negotiated with SOMAS, KPG SOMAS to get down to 326. We got it down from 530 by removing things that we didn't think were necessary. So let me see, what else can I tell you about that job? I mean, it's something that we want to get done as soon as possible. We want to get that constructed this summer if we can. And that's why we're here now.
Actually, the funding's dependent on it getting constructed this summer. So letter-
Partially defended, yeah.
the
they
letter
want-
we received said that we had to spend the money in 2023. So we need to get the design, we need to get a bit.
And so the current biennial budget is 704. We've spent 163,000. We're proposing to spend 320,000 additional, which would leave you 221,000 and change under your biennial budget for this project.
Correct.
And the funding source for this project is it the grant from?
No, this comes out of our, Drew, what does it come out of? So we're going to use the money for construction, the $5 million towards construction. And we were going to pay for this through,
I mean, so for this biennium, right, 2021, 2022 is coming out of city funds. I don't think we had anticipated the $5 million from the state until we were well into this biennium for the most part. So the time that we amended the CIP, that is, or council approved the amended CIP, I believe that was the funding source.
So why isn't this $221,000 used to pay for the last two agenda bills?
Well, I mean, so you get into a situation where 153 plus the $60,000, you get a little tight, right? You do, right? And we need to make sure that we remain in our appropriation. So I need to make sure that in case the burn rate, right, if we exceed that burn rate, for example, and come in at $80,000, that we're not going to be coming back to you here with a emergency budget amendment by the end of the year at Christmas, right? For example, asking you to approve a $10,000 appropriation increase, right? So we need maybe just a little bit more capacity in order to make it through the end of the year. I don't want to prejudge exactly. They may have more. Can't say that. Snoqualmie Parkway work coming. I'm not sure exactly what would potentially come next, right? Necessarily, but could be more in addition to this that we may want to just hold on to just in case there is anything that may come forward that may require this project budget.
Yeah, I mean, that was really my big question was, is there anything anticipated for the 2021, 2022 biennial budget that would be around $200,000 that we haven't seen yet? That, yeah, what?
Last two agenda bills.
They're specifically related to Snoqualmie Parkway.
And there could be things like street resurfacing and sidewalk projects that we may want to come back as well. And so,
We did do a considerable amount of crack filling out there
right.
this season. I don't know if those bills are processed yet or not.
Do you think that we could raise up the manhole covers to be in line with the street?
That's
Okay,
part of
thank
it.
you.
Mhm.
So I don't know if those crack fill bills are processed through or not, but that's could be. I think it was 100. Can't remember, 170. Yeah. So
Do you think there's another 165 on top of the 163 listed as already incurred?
I don't know if those bills have been processed.
We'll have to take a look at the street resurfacing budget, right, and compare, right, what we spent against that. That may require some of the $200,000 that we see here, depending on that. But our goal is to remain within the total appropriation given to us by council, right, within the Transportation Capital Fund, which encompasses sidewalks, streets, and the Snoqualmie Parkway. And if, you know, if we don't want to make sure we stay out of trouble, right? That is, yeah,
But you also got me comfortable when you did incurred and anticipated in prior agenda bills. If there's anticipated stuff, we ought to see it in there. Councilman Johnson.
Yeah, that was kind of, what I was, I think gonna get at is, we shouldn't assume that at the end of the year, at this point, that, this is coming out street tree surfacing or snow.
Transportation Capital Fund. right now,
Okay,
Yeah.
that we're going to be 200,000-ish under budget
Mhm.
for that. That will then go into, fund balance at the end of the year. We shouldn't make that assumption at this point. That 200,000 could end up going to something else.
Right,
Okay,
yeah, and I
thank
would
you.
just, yeah. We don't want to increase the risk, right, that we're going to
Right.
exceed our budget appropriation and therefore have to report back to the state auditor that we, you know, did that. And so this provides us just with that capacity, right, enough to just hopefully get us through by the end of the year.
We'll have a different discussion if that happens, so.
I know, that's, I mean, would you rather have that discussion or this one right now? So.
No, I'm just like,
Uh-huh,
oh, we got 200,000, let's go spend it on, I'll use XYZ again.
Mm,
Is XYZ of higher priority than the other two projects? I just pulled $200,000 out of next biennial to pay for.
I mean, part of it is also remaining within their total project budget.
Agreed,
too,
that's
and
what
so,
I'm
Yeah,
trying to remain with it,
Yeah.
within the project budget and within the biennial budget if we can. Okay, but I just
Did I-
saving two, I pulled two, and now I'm gonna go spend a different two.
Did I understand this correctly, that if we don't accomplish this, then by summer, then the 5 million that we're getting from the state, we don't get to use?
It is in jeopardy according to the document they sent us.
Yeah, no argument on the project.
Oh, Okay,
So just talking about process, right?
so,
Talking the dollars.
so
that's
we
all
could
it
have,
is.
we could have covered those other two projects and then had the discussion, the same discussion that we had on those on this one. Right? The discussion that we had about, right?
Except this one's saved. The other
Except
two,
this one's what?
this one is, this one, at least as analyzed here, has a position of about a $200,000 savings. The others were funded in the existing biennial, and we had to go pull money forward to pay for them.
Okay.
So, slightly different. And my only question is.
Those are bridges and
200,000,
we're
what can I
all-
do with it?
You know,
Um,
those are bridges and we're all allergic to gravity at
mhm.
a certain point. So,
It's a law from a higher authority than any of us, yes. Okay. I'm good with this and I'm good with consent.
Same
Put that one on consent.
consent.
All right.
All right, thanks.
Sorry to put you guys through it. Trying to understand what's going on. Community center expansion project. I assume this is discussion only. Is the intent to have is the intent to have this discussion at council? I mean, do you want to do it here and council, or you just want to do it once at council?
Well, this is a prelude to a conversation about a consultant contract for one of these options, just to lay the background. The contract would then, if recommended by the committee, be on the council agenda and likely have a presentation with it from the,
Okay, go through
which
it.
could do twice, but or once, or you could put it on consent.
Let's just put the community center expansion on consent.
Let's not make consent waste time. It's supposed to save time. If we individually pull everything off consent, we've just wasted time. Okay. And the options are. I guess I sidetracked. Lead us through the conversation.
Sure. So just a little history. projects you were talking about with Mr. Hamlin and other projects that are on the CIP are typically constructed using what we call the traditional design bid build method. The city goes through a process required by state law, selects an architect or an engineer. It's a qualification-based process. We then have a design prepared for us. The owner in a project like that, meaning the city, then takes the risk, legal risk that the design has to be buildable. We put it out for a bid. We're required to give it to the lowest responsible bidder. We don't get to pick the contractor. Councilmember Holloway, particularly familiar with when a project goes sideways, what can happen. Long, expensive litigation. It's not a very flexible process. There are limited options for not using that process. One of them is an option that the city used when the community center was originally constructed. That's a lease back method. It's described. It's a little bit of some people might call it a shell game. Perhaps that's a bit of a harsh term, but the city leases the property to a contractor that is selected through a qualification-based process that also have price negotiations in it. The contractor or developer takes the risk and bears all of the costs of constructing a building or structure, then leases it back to the city. The city can accelerate the lease payments, terminate the lease, and essentially pay the lease costs for the building. So similarly, you pay an amount at the end of the day, similar to what you might have otherwise, but through a process that had a different selection methodology. When they go well, there's closer coordination between the city and the developer through the design process. Things that might result in problems in a traditional process can get ironed out before or during construction in a way that we're not usually able to do in the traditional process. It's a cumbersome process. Leaseback is to paper. The legal documents are complicated. It's not very straightforward. It can be complicated additionally in a situation like we find ourselves in now, where we would be trying to lease when you have vacant property, you can lease it, the developer takes it, they're fully responsible while they build it, and the statute says they have to bear the cost. When you've got an existing structure like the city does with a community center, leasing it to someone else is a lot more complicated. In addition, when you've got an existing building that is occupied by a private entity, which the YMCA is for tax purposes, if you want to reserve yourself the ability potentially to issue debt to fund the expansion, leaseback is not a viable option. So that leaves us with what's called under the statute alternative public works contracting methods, design build, and general contractor construction manager. The state has used design build for example, the 520 project, large projects. They're using design build right now on the SR 18 Divergent Diamond, I-90 intersection Divergent Diamond project. It is a way to select a contractor based primarily on qualifications and qualifications that you, the city council would set. Go through, identify finalists, then pick someone, and then negotiate a maximum allowable construction cost, the MAC, and then enter into a contract. And then that entity would go away and design it in coordination with staff and then build it for the agreed on price. It's more streamlined in many ways. And in a situation like we find ourselves with the YMCA, it can offer a lot of flexibility, particularly where the entity, the Y, has contractors and designers with whom they work and who would be able to submit an application to be chosen potentially to be that design builder. The hitch with these methods is when they were first initiated in state statute about 20 years ago, they were only allowed to be used by the state and then certain very large government entities. Gradually over the years, and that was partly due to the fact it was complicated and unfamiliar process, partly due to opposition from the contractor lobby that perceived a loss of business. over the years, the legislature gradually made it available to more and smaller jurisdictions and for smaller projects. And finally, right about the time of the pandemic, opened the doors to everyone. However, if you haven't used it before, like Snoqualmie has not, you've got to qualify by applying for review and approval from a state committee, a committee of the Capital Projects Advisory Review Board, CPARB, and the committee is the Project Review Committee, or the PRC. To do that, we have to identify the method we want to use, the potential design, conceptual price. We've got to have some consultant assistance. We have to identify our team. There are folks available who do that, Parametrics being chief among them. And the state allows members of the PRC itself to assist applicants. Particular person that we have communicated with at Parametrics, his name is Jim Dugan, is a member of the PRC, but a member of the Bellevue City Council, who's an engineer, has been a long time member of the PRC as well. So there are people in the industry who participate. And so what we would like to do is bring a contract forward, proposed consultant contract forward with Parametrics that would include assistance with that process of applying for and getting PRC approval. The scope that they will propose to us has outlines costs all the way through, should the city decide to use them for that, potentially even as the city's construction representative. But we wouldn't need to make those decisions now. It's just that they've scoped it for us so we could see what those costs would look like. The PRC meets and considers applications every 2 months. And I think the next one that would be realistic for us to assemble an application is a December date. And so we would like to, in fairly short order, next meeting, or if need be, the following, bring you that proposal. Mr. Dugan has an excellent presentation about these options, the pros and cons of design build versus GCCM versus a traditional method. And we would ask him to provide you some of that detail in a presentation as part of this contract. But before we got there, I thought it'd be helpful for me to just have this conversation. The agenda bill is a bit longer version of what I just told you, so that be a little bit more familiar with the lexicon and terminology, history of process. Questions, comments, love it, hate it, bring it forward, don't bring it forward.
I guess my only question is about appearance of fairness. Does that ever come up? You know, is that a
Vis-a-vis
the contractor
the
chosen?
PRC or with when we would select a design builder.
Yeah, that one. The one where we would, the,
Select.
yes.
I am not familiar with that coming up. There are some considerations in terms of that are spelled out in the statute, steps that the city has to take to make information that we have available about the conceptual project, details that we have about estimated MAC, for instance, and other information. And then we would specify criteria. But it is a process that's designed to allow the local jurisdiction to pick up a contractor, a design builder with whom it can have a positive working relationship. So I suppose it's possible. I'm not familiar with those objections being raised before.
I think you explained it really well. I don't think I have any questions. I mean, it looks like we would qualify for this looking at what's listed here.
We do qualify under the now current legal requirements. In past years, Snoqualmie would not have it, did not qualify, and when the community center was originally built. And I would say just prior to the pandemic, we were about at this point in the process and had worked up a scope and were planning to make this presentation to council when we got into January, and then the pandemic hit and staff work on the community center expansion was essentially halted until we got through all of that. So
This is a good thing. The only concern I have is I'm not, and it may be personal, I'm not sure how much of a go-do we have on the community center. we have discussion and we kind of have a conceptually the plan, but I'm not sure we've all said, good, it's committed, go do it. We're going to do this, period. But I think this can be said that if and when we do finally make a go do decision, there's lead time to go through this.
Exactly. That's the reason for bringing this forward.
Right now, let's
is-
go through the lead time to do this, and have it ready as an option if and when there's a go do decision. Okay. Yeah, it'd be good to have that as an option. And do the groundwork to make that a possible.
Right. And in addition, I think the representatives from the YMCA had or conversations with city representatives, questions about additional level of detail and costs and so on, were starting to come up. And so those then raise the question of what method are we going to use? And, you know, if we were going to use this, we wouldn't necessarily want to engage yet further on those details, but would rather go forward, get approval, put something together, put a solicitation out on the street, and then get proposals before asking because I think the council, before you commit to say, go do the community center, you probably want to know a lot more about what it would look like and what it would cost. And one of the ways that you get that information is by first getting approval to use this method and then putting a proposal on the street and getting proposals back from design builders that say, here's our proposal, it would look like this, here's our proposed MAC. So that would give you a much more informed basis on which to make a go-no decision.
Okay.
All right. We'll be
Yeah,
back.
so love to see
More
it.
to come on this.
Promptly next Monday, probably want to at least drop a hint. Try to do that during council.
Oh, that this is coming?
Yeah.
Sure.
That we want to look at it.
We could do that either in the committee report or the city administrator or mayor's report. We could bring it up as well. Whatever.
I was
the
thinking to as
council's
part of
preference.
committee.
Just leave it on the committee report. Okay. Thank you.
Where are we? Community center
This is probably
job
mine
order
too.
contracting consulting service contract with Gordian Group. We got 5 minutes.
Okay. So one of the tools that I'm going to request to be given to us in order to complete the tasks in the capital improvement plan is to be able to use job order contracting. That's yet another way to complete projects. And if we have Gordian on the horn, and they can do a much better job of explaining this than I can. But effectively, what we will do is pre-bid tasks ahead of time so that my department has a catalog where we can pick out of that catalog. For example, we recently had a car go over the ravine on Douglas at the Parkway and took out a whole bunch of fence. Everybody's seen the ugly 4x4s and orange fence, which really is a safety hazard. That is a perfect jock task to get that replaced quickly. So we go to that catalog, we execute the job order, and the work happens. But I'm going to throw it to Michael Celeste, who's got 3 minutes now to do the presentation.
Well,
Yes. Hello, it's Michael here. I also have my director on the call too here, Randy Horn as well.
hang on a second, Michael.
You want to kick it to the next meeting?
Well, I want to give it due time for consideration.
Okay. Michael, Randy, can we postpone this for 2 weeks?
Sure. We could give you the abbreviated version, but if you definitely want to switch it 2 weeks, we could definitely be available then. Absolutely.
He sounds like he talks fast. so.
I did. I did.
Abbreviated version, you're just gonna have to do it again in 2 weeks. And I
Okay.
really, I don't want to make judgment on an abbreviated version.
Sure.
So if we could, let's gin this up top of the agenda in 2 weeks.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Okay.
You can cuss at me late at night.
No, no problem. Thank you.
With that, that's the agenda. Any objections to adjournment?
Can we just make sure that we put them at the top of whatever plan we have for 2 weeks from now, so that they don't end up waiting and then we don't get to them.
Yes.
Mr. Sauerman.
Just to be clear, Washington Department of Commerce grant is going to consent. The consultant services for OTEC is going to consent. The Meadowbrook Bridge load rating is remaining on committee reports. Consultant services with KPG is going to consent. The community center expansion is staying on committee reports. And then we're postponing the job order contracting consulting services to the next meeting.
Yes, sir. All right. Any other comments for closing? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you all. I got 2 minutes.